Jayam Vishnu Pad Paramahamsa Paribrajagacharya Asto Tarasatta Sri Srimad, His Divine Grace, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Sikaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Srivas Adi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Sri Sri Radha Krishna Gopal Gopinath Shamakund Radha Kund Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Mayapur Navadvip Dham Ki Jai. Ganga Mai Yamuna Mai Ki Jai. Bhakti Devi Tulsi Maharani Ki Jai. Jai. Samaveda Bhakti Vrinda Ki Jai. Gaura Premanandi. All glories to the assembled devotees.
Hare Krishna.
All glories to the assembled devotees.
Hare Krishna.
All glories to the assembled devotees.
Hare Krishna.
All glories to the lotus feet of Sri Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna. Welcome everyone. We continue our study of Srimad Bhagavatam, first canto, in the 19th chapter. Today's text is number 21. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Sarve Vayam Tavadihas Maheta Kalevaram Yavad Aso Vihaya Lokam Param Virajaskam Vishokam Yasyapyayam Bhagavata Pradhanaha Sarve Vayam Tavad Ihas Maheta Kalevaram Yavad Aso Vihaya Lokam Param Virajaskam Vishokam Yasyapyayam Bhagavata Pradhanaha Sarve Vayam Tavad Ihas Maheta Kalevaram Yavad Aso Vihaya Lokam Param Virajaskam Vishokam Yasyapyayam Bhagavata Pradhanaha. Please chant.
Sarve Vayam Tavad Isha Maheta Kalevaram Yavad Aso Vihaya Lokam Param Virajaskam Vishokam Yasyatayam Bhagavata Pradhanaha.
Hare Krishna. Sarve Vayam Tavad Yaharshmahetha Kalevaram Yavat Asho Vihaya Lokam Param Virajashkam Vishakam Yashyate Ayam Bhagavata Pradhanaha.
Hare Krishna. Sarve Vayam Tavadihasmahe Atha Kalevaram Yavad Asao Vihaya Lokam Param Virajaskam Vishokam Yasyatya Ayam Bhagavate Pradhanaha.
Sarve Vayam Tavad Ihasmahetha Kalevaram Yavad Asau Vihaya Lokam Param Virajaskam Vishokam Yasyachayam bhagavata pradhana.
Anyone else? Okay. Word for word. Sarve, all. Vayam, of us. Tavat, as long as. Iha, at this place. Asamahe, shall stay. Ata, hereafter. Kalevaram, the body. Yavat, so long. Asau, the king. Vihaya, giving up. Lokam, the planet. Param, the supreme. Virajaskam, completely free from mundane contamination. Vishokam, completely free from all kinds of lamentation. Yasyati, returns. Ayam, this. Bhagavata, devotee. Pradhanaha, the foremost. Translation. We shall all wait here until the foremost devotee of the Lord, Maharaj Parikshit, returns to the supreme planet, which is completely free from all mundane contaminations and all kinds of lamentation. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Beyond the limitation of the material creation, which is compared to the cloud in the sky, there is the Paravyoma, or the spiritual sky, full of planets called Vaikunthas. Each Vaikuntha planet are also differently known. Such Vaikuntha planets are also differently known as the Purushottama Loka, Achyuta Loka, Trivikrama Loka, Rishikesh Loka, Keshava Loka, Aniruddha Loka, Madhava Loka, Pradyumna Loka, Sankarshana Loka, Sridhara Loka, Vasudeva Loka, Ayodhya Loka, Dvaraka Loka, and many other millions of spiritual lokas, wherein the personality of Godhead predominates. All the living entities there are liberated souls with spiritual bodies as good as that of the Lord. There is no material contamination. Everything there is spiritual, and therefore there is nothing objectively lamentable. They are full of transcendental bliss and are without birth, death, old age, and disease. And amongst all the above mentioned Vaikuntha Lokas, there is one supreme Loka called Goloka Vrindavan, which is the abode of Lord Sri Krishna and his specific associates. Maharaj Parikshit was destined to achieve this particular Loka, and the great rishis assembled there could foresee this. All of them consulted among themselves about the great departure of the great king, and they wanted to see him up to the last moment, because they would no more be able to see such a great devotee of the Lord. When a great devotee of the Lord passes away, there is nothing to be lamented, because the devotee is destined to enter into the kingdom of God. But the sorry plight is that such great devotees leave our sight, and therefore there is every reason to be sorry. As the Lord is rarely to be seen by our present eyes, so also are the great devotees. The great rishis, therefore, correctly decided to remain on the spot till the last moment. The verse again, we shall all wait here until the foremost devotee of the Lord, Maharaj Parikshit, returns to the supreme planet, which is completely free from all mundane contamination and all kinds of lamentation. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Namane Namaste Saraswate Devi Gaura Vanipacharni Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatare Om Ajnana Timirandasya Jnana Shalakaya Chakshuram Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Vanchakalpatrubhyascha Kripasindhubhyavcha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Hare Krishna. So here we are. All these great personalities have shown up to hear from Shukadev Goswami, but they're also honoring Maharaj Parikshit for making such a nice vow at the end of his life, for not trying to counteract the curse, not trying to argue about it, not trying to explain himself. Just he understands, okay, this is Krishna's will, so I'm going to take full advantage of it. I'm not going to try to control it in any way, right? And so he takes it upon himself to sit himself on the bank of the Ganges, and he decides, okay, I just want to hear Bhagavad Gita for the rest of my days, these last 7 days. And so now all these great saintly personalities, devatas, rishis, sages, they all come, and they're hearing from Shukadev Goswami, but they're also honoring Maharaj Parikshit, and they are going to sit there until Maharaj Parikshit returns to the supreme abode, Goloka Vrindavan. So very recently, one of my godbrothers sent me a book, and in that book there's a parable. It's called The Tale of Two Wolves. Now, many of you may have heard this tale before. Actually, I heard it before years ago, but it was called The Tale of Two Bears. So there's different versions of this story, but the idea of the story is all the same. And in this tale, there's a wise old grandfather. It's like the village elder. He's a Cherokee Native American. And he's talking to his granddaughter, and he's explaining to her the way of the world, morality, things like that. And so he tells her this tale of two wolves. And so he says, my dear granddaughter, within every person, there are these two great, powerful wolves. And there's an eternal struggle. They're fighting one another. One of them is good, and one of them is evil. So the evil one, he represents fear, envy, regret, greed, guilt, inferiority, shame, resentment, and lies. The other one is good. He is joy, peace, love, hope, serenity, kindness, generosity, compassion, and truth. Right? And so these two wolves, the evil and the good, they're fighting within every single one of us. And so the granddaughter, she's listening very attentively, and she has big, wide eyes, and she's hearing about this eternal struggle that's going on inside of every person with these two wolves. And she says, grandfather, which of these wolves win? And the grandfather says, the one that you feed. So the moral of this story for most people is to understand that there is good and evil within everyone. There's the potential for both. And that whichever wolf we feed, that's what we're going to end up being. So if we're feeding fear, envy, regret, greed, guilt, inferiority, shame, resentment, and lies, if that's what we're paying our attention to, that's what we're giving our our time and energy, then that's how we will be. But if we are focusing our time on things like joy, peace, love, hope, serenity, kindness, generosity, compassion, and truth, then if we're feeding those things, then the good wolf inside us wins, right? Now, we as aspiring Vaishnavas, we don't care so much for good versus evil, because we know that in this material world, good and evil are just two sides of the same coin. It's a material duality, right? So even if we are just good for goodness sake in this material world, the best we get is a trip to the heavenly planets, right? Which is nice. The heavenly planets are nice. You get to live a long time. You get to enjoy things that are not even fathomable here in the middle range of this universe. But it's still temporary. It's still not eternal bliss, right? It may be some better happiness than we're experiencing now, or slightly less pain and suffering than we're experiencing now. But it's certainly not something that we as aspiring Vaishnavas want to strive for. So for us, this tale of these two wolves isn't about good versus evil. It's not about the material duality. It's about spiritual versus material. Right. Now, one might say, well, isn't that just a duality also? Spiritual versus material? But there's a difference. So good and evil, right? They're both happening in this material world. So that's duality. But spiritual and material, that's like substance and shadow, or you can say reality versus reflection, right? So it's not the same. It's not a duality like material dualities. So we jivas, we living entities, as mentioned in the purport, we have the same qualities as Sri Krishna, but we're marginal. We're marginal potency. So we also have, in our nature, we have the option to exercise our free will and consider ourselves independent from Krishna as individual controllers and enjoyers. Now, one may ask, why? why would we have this option? Why can't everything just be perfectly peaceful and harmonic and nice? And the answer to that is because the nature of relationship is that it can't be relished unless it's actually a choice, right? If there's no other choice, if there's no other option aside from just this, perfection, then there's really nothing to relish. There's nothing sweet about it. It's just a machine, right? This is how it works. That's the only way, and it's just how it works. And so, when we see a machine, we don't necessarily think, oh, that's such a sweet thing. We just see, okay, it works, it's practical, it's nice. But relationship, that's a different thing. That's something that we want to find some ras. There's no ras in machinery. There's just practicality. So for relationships, there has to be this actual desire, this need to associate with one another. Not that it's the only option, it's that you actually want to do it. There are other options, but you don't want those other options. You want to do it. So that's where the taste comes in relationships. So we jivas have that option, right? We have the option to try to live independently from Krishna as independent controllers and enjoyers. So we've all exercised that, all of us here. We're in the material world. So we've all exercised that. We are rebellious living entities who decided to try our hand at being independent controllers and enjoyers. So here we are in the material world, right? And in the material world, there are these dualities, good and evil, hot and cold, etc. But we aspiring Vaishnavas, we want to break free from those dualities. We don't want to, our struggle isn't this good versus evil. Our struggle is reality versus reflection. Because in the supreme abode, the spiritual world, that's reality. We learn this in Bhagavad Gita 15th chapter, that the material world is just a reflection of the spiritual world. There's an imperishable banyan tree upside down. So the real banyan tree is there in the spiritual world, Paravyoma, and it reflects upon desire. That's how we learn in the 15th chapter of Gita. And on that desire is reflected this tree. And it looks just the same, but it doesn't have the substance. It's just the reflection. So just like if we look in a mirror, we can see the form, we can see our body, But if we have an itch on our face, we can't scratch the one on the mirror. It doesn't work. We can't relieve an itch like that. We can't even touch the face. We can, I'm pretending my phone is a mirror here. And so I can almost touch finger to finger, but it doesn't quite work. So that's how mirrors are, right? And so that's the difference between spirit and material. One's real, and then one's just a reflection. So it's not a duality. It's not two sides of the same coin, like good versus evil. So we aspiring Vaishnavas, our struggle, our two wolves inside, aren't good versus evil. These are things that we pay attention to, obviously, because the list that I read of what the good wolf and the evil wolf represented, there are similar lists in the Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, etc., of these good qualities and bad qualities. But for us, the struggle is between spiritual and material. But the same moral is there. The one that's going to win is the one that we feed, right? So what that means for us is whichever qualities we cultivate, if we cultivate spiritual qualities, if we spend our time doing spiritual activities, if we constantly direct our consciousness away from self-centric, away from doing things because we want to do them for our own pleasure, for our own comfort, for our own entertainment, and do things for Krishna's pleasure, for his entertainment, for his comfort. As we redirect that consciousness over toward spiritual consciousness, then our destination will be the spiritual destination. But if we feed that other wolf, the one of materiality, is that a word? I don't know. But if we feed that, the desire to control, the desire to enjoy, the desire to be comfortable or entertained, if we feed that wolf, then that's the one that will win. It's an eternal struggle. And so the reason I bring this up for this verse, because it seems like maybe this doesn't even fit in. Why am I saying what? I just read a story and I thought it was nice, so I'm telling you all about it. No, it fits in because these great sages, they can go wherever they want, right? And this incident happened where Maharaj Parikshit, due to providence, he committed a mistake. He put a dead snake around a brahmana's neck, and the son of that brahmana, he heard a different story. He got very upset and he cursed him. He cursed Maharaj Parikshit. So Maharaj Parikshit, we know, is a very great soul. He was saved by Krishna in the womb. He's a saintly emperor, not just a king, but an emperor. He was emperor of the whole world, just as good as Maharaj Yudhishthira. He was very devout, very devoted. And we see that his reaction to when he became cursed, even before he became cursed, he was lamenting what he did. He was thinking, that's not like me. Why would I do such a thing? Sure, I was thirsty, but it's not this fellow's fault. Why did I take it out on him? So he was already lamenting. And then he heard about the curse and he just said, okay, this is what I'm going to do. It's time for me to go. I'm just going to hear about Krishna. He didn't fight it. He didn't try to argue it. He didn't try to counteract it. He could have. He's a quite powerful person. He could have said, well, this Brahmana boy, he misunderstood. That's okay. No, he sat there. And so these great souls are understanding, okay, this is the situation. Here's a great soul. He made a mistake, but he's sticking to the process. It's not swerving off of the path. And he's sitting here and just listening to the Bhagavad Gita until he dies. And so these sages know that he's going to also go back to Godhead. So they are sitting there waiting to see this event. They want to witness this firsthand, right? And this relates to the parable I was talking about, because here they are feeding that wolf of spirituality, right? Now, if they were to go and see a concert of their favorite band instead, they would be feeding a different wolf, right? And so these two wolves or bears, however you want to tell the story. I kind of like the bears better because bigger, much more powerful. So we'll go with the wolves for the good versus evil, but for the spiritual versus material, they're very big bears, right? So we have to pay attention to which one we're feeding, right? If we're feeding our material desires, if anytime something comes up that we're materially attracted to, and we're just doing those things, and that's what we're attracted to, that's where we're putting our time and energy, then we're feeding that bear of materialism. And so that's where we will stay in the material world. But when we come to our senses through study of the Shastra, through taking and following the instructions of the Guru, and by following the examples of the sadhus, and we start cultivating spirituality, we start feeding that bear of spirituality, then our destination becomes the spiritual world. We're reading about how Maharaj Parikshit, that's where he's going. So we see, based on Maharaj Parikshit's example, we see that he was always feeding that bear of spirituality, right? There were so many opportunities where he could have, he was an emperor of the world. He could have milked that for all it was worth. If I were an emperor, I'd be enjoying left and right. I wouldn't be able to handle it. That's why Krishna didn't make me an emperor. So we can see that if we had access to, these things, we wouldn't use them as wisely as Maharaj Parikshit, right? And when he did make a mistake, he didn't try to counteract it. When I make a mistake and someone confronts me about it, I actually try to explain myself. Oh, actually, no, I didn't mean to say it like that. What I meant was this, but I shouldn't do that. I should say, well, it doesn't matter what I meant. This is how they took it. And since they took it that way, I should apologize, even though I didn't mean it that way, right? She's like, oh, I am so sorry. I honestly didn't even mean it like that, but I understand that it came out like that. And so I'm very sorry, right? So there's different ways that we have to learn how to behave. And we can do that based on following the example of these devotees. So yes, we have to feed that bear of spirituality and not feed that bear of materialism. And so this is not just a daily struggle. Moment to moment, we have this struggle. It's always going on. And what we find that we're doing is that we're actually feeding both, right? So it just depends on which one we're feeding more. That's the one that's going to win, right? So the more we feed the material bear, the more we're going to be engaged in material activities. But the more we feed that spiritual bear, the more we'll open our eyes to reality, that we'll connect with that substance instead of dealing with that shadow. And this is why sadhana is very important, right? This is why it's very important that we pay attention to what we do throughout the day. And we want to make sure that it's actually focused, that it's actually mindful, that it's compassionate and kind, and that it's centered around Krishna. Not just being kind and compassionate for the sake of being materially good, but for the sake of serving Krishna, right? This is a very important thing that we have to understand. I got through my notes very quickly today. Sometimes I don't get through my notes at all, and I try to rush through them at the end, and I feel bad. And then other times I figure, okay, I'm just going to put fewer notes down, and then, that way I don't have to rush through. But then I finished quite early. So let's see if there are any questions or comments on this.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
While we're waiting for anybody else to come up with their questions. So I was just thinking about what you said and trying to apply it to decisions that I have to make. I was just wondering if you can give some practical examples. Sometimes I think it's easier for me to understand when how do I make it, most of the decisions that I have to make are, mundane, everyday decisions. How do I make them Krishna-centered? Say it's a service I have to do at the temple, and I want to pass it on. I'm thinking about it more in a practical, everyday way. What metrics do I use to make it Krishna centered?
That's a very important question, and this is something that we're all struggling with. So we have to remember that it's less about the detail and more about the principle, more about the consciousness, not about the thing that we're doing, but our mood behind it, our consciousness behind it, why we're doing it. So everybody has to eat, for example, right? Everyone got to eat. So we're going to eat, right? And as aspiring devotees, of course, we eat a certain type of thing. Now, one can say that devotees are vegetarian, but as Srila Prabhupada pointed out, that we're actually Krishnatarian. We don't eat anything that's not offered to Krishna. And it just happens to be that the things that are offered to Krishna are also vegetarian. But if we just get this idea that that we're vegetarians, that's it, then we're struggling against the good and the evil wolves. We're not struggling against the spiritual and the material bears or wolves. So we have to understand that the decisions we make, the external decision we make, whether we'll do something or not, like eating, for example, we can choose, okay, we want to make sure that we're eating vegetarian. We want to make sure that they're very nice vegetables. We want to make sure that they're prepared properly. All the right spices are there. But if we don't then offer it to Krishna, if we just eat it, then we're eating sin, right? Yajna sishtashina shanto mujante sarvakil visai bunjate te tvagam papa ye pachantyat makarna. The reason that the devotees of the Lord are released from all kinds of sins is because they eat food which is first offered in sacrifice. Others who eat food for sense enjoyment verily eat only sin. So it doesn't matter what the food is. If it's not offered to Krishna, then you're eating sin, right? So it's the consciousness, not the activity, right? So it's a very subtle thing that we have to learn how to pick up on. Now, generally in the beginning, we tend to focus on the details. And that's how sadhana works. Sadhana bhakti means that there are details that are given by the acharyas that we should follow. We don't naturally follow them, but we know that they are the rules. So we start following because we know, okay, this is what we're meant to do. But eventually, we are to understand the principle behind them, right? So first, okay, yeah, we're vegetarian, we are sober, so we refrain from intoxications, we don't gamble, and we don't engage in illicit sex, right? So we know these things. But then later, we actually understand the heart of those principles, or the principle, which is whatever you're doing, do it for Krishna, not for ourselves, right? So material bear, spiritual bear, right? And so we have to feed that. So we have to pay attention to what our consciousness is. So the example I gave was eating. You can give the example for anything. Whatever activity you're doing, even if it's something that your spiritual master asks you to do, and it is a service, ask yourself, am I doing this actually for Krishna's pleasure, or am I doing it for myself? Maybe I'm doing it for self-aggrandizement. Maybe I just want to be popular among the devotee community. Maybe I want to have a name for myself. Maybe I want my name to be on a plaque at the temple. There may be various motivating factors. So we have to identify those within ourselves. What is my motivation? Am I doing this actually to please Krishna, or am I doing this because it makes me feel good independently? And so we have to pay attention to this, and then make sure we feed that the spiritual bear, not the material one. So wherever we see that we're making that proper connection, we increase those activities. And wherever we see that we're not, it's not that we necessarily have to decrease those. Like, say for eating, for example, say I'm not connecting eating. So I don't stop eating, right? But I start seeing, okay, how do I make it so instead of me feeding this material bear while eating, I'm actually feeding the spiritual bear? So we want to make sure that we're actually doing the offering, and doing it with as much love and devotion as we can possibly conjure up. we have to think of Krishna as a person, as our best friend. And so we want to know what he likes to eat. And when we're cooking it, we want to make sure that we're clean. We want to make sure that our consciousness is clear. We want to make sure that we're not putting any negative ingredients or negative energy into the food. We want to just make it as nicely as possible with as much love and devotion as we could possibly conjure up, and then offer it to Krishna, right? And so when we do that, right, then we're feeding the spiritual bear. So it's not that, and I try to make this clear in several other discussions that we've had in different ways, of when we find that we're attached to something, right, and we know that it's just all about us, it's not that we drop it, right, because that's called Paugul Vairagya, it's false renunciation. We have to figure out, what about this thing is attracting me? Because I'm not even thinking, I'm just, I don't have to, I'm spontaneously attracted to these things, these material things, right? And so, but what is it about that thing that is attracting me? And so I've given examples before. I used to be a race car driver a long time ago. And another example I gave was years ago, I was playing a video game online. And I realized that the reason that I was attracted to that particular game was because you had to reach out to other people that were playing the game, and you had to cooperate with one another, and in order for you to meet all of your goals, right? And so that was what I liked. I liked the sense of community, of coming together. And so, well, we have that also in the devotee community. It's called sadhu sangha, coming together and cooperating and making something happen. So then once I saw that connection, why I was so attracted to playing that particular game, I said, all right, well, instead of doing that, I'm just going to do that with the devotees. So I teamed up with a group of devotees that had a similar service that they were doing. And now we do that service together, right? And so that filled that need. So instead of feeding that material bear by playing this game, I figured out, okay, what about that was actually attracting me? And it's Krishna's potency in that, obviously, right? And so now we just use it in the proper way. So now, instead of working with a team of other video game enthusiasts to get some goal it's not even a tangible goal, it's just, you get rewards on a digital interface. It's not even substantial. It's shadow, right? It's not substance, it's shadow. It's not real, it's reflection, right? So once we see the reality of it and we engage that there, we're still appreciating the same thing, but then instead of appreciating it for our own sense gratification, we're appreciating how it's being used in Krishna's service. And so we can do that with anything. So whatever we see that we're attached to, we just have to figure out, okay, why exactly am I attached to this thing? And then we have to figure out, okay, now how can I still appreciate this thing, but then use it properly in Krishna's service instead of using it for my own sense gratification? Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. It's a constant. Yeah. So as you were answering, I was thinking about my situation again, and it's something that is not done once and over with. It's a constant. We'll have to continuously keep thinking about it. And thank you, Prabhu.
Sure. Yeah, it's a constant struggle.
Charichandra Prabhu, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
So I was hearing your analogy, by touching, the reflection, the mirror, you don't feel. That's nice, it's interesting. But at the same time, isn't it there's some reality to it? It is said that happiness in this material world is not completely not, it's like a drop. So it's a nice thinking, but I just want to see how we will understand this.
Yeah, okay. So the material world isn't false. We're not Maya bodies, but it is illusory, right? So we experience a reflection of the spiritual world. And so what we're experiencing is real in the sense that we're experiencing it, but it can't be fulfilling because it's not connected to the actual source, the substance. It's just the shadow. So when we look in a mirror, we can see the different aspects of our reflection. So there's some reality in it. It's an accurate portrayal of what's actually real, but it can't be fulfilling because there's no substance there. So anytime we try to enjoy something in this material world, there's no way that we can fulfill that desire, because what we actually want is the substance, not the shadow. Just like a fish being out of water, or etc. So many different examples that were given. Did that clear that up, Prabhu?
Yeah, thank you. So then
Krishna.
in this verse, coming back to this verse, the sages decided that they want to stay here until the great king departs.
Yes.
So many things comes into picture. Is it, I think the purport says that they wanted to be, because they cannot see him anymore. That's what they were there. Yeah. Is that the only reason?
Oh, because I see. Okay. No, that's a good question. They're thinking, oh, we're not going to be able to see him anymore, so we may as well get her. Okay. There are two things that I actually wanted to say about this, and I didn't write them in my notes, so I didn't say them. But so thank you for bringing that up. So the one thing is, we notice these days that great souls, many of them, aren't really fully appreciated until they're gone, unfortunately, right? We see that when these great personalities leave, all of a sudden everybody's coming out of the woodwork and saying, oh, I didn't get enough association with this person, right? And they're lamenting and regretting. So that should make us understand that there are still great souls around us, and we should take full advantage of their association whenever possible. Feed that spiritual bear, right? So that's one thing. Another thing I wanted to say, which is not related to your question, but about this idea that they wanted to stay with him because they knew he was going. So after Lord Krishna chastised the Kaliya serpent, I think we all know the pastime in here. Multi-headed Naga, and Krishna went out, and first he was sort of dancing around and wrestling, and it looked like Kaliya was actually winning at one point early on, right? Krishna was entangled in the coils of Kaliya, and it was so painful to all of the residents of Vrindavan, because everyone heard what was going on. So the whole village was there on the bank of the Yamuna, and they're seeing this happen. And when they perceived that Krishna was not only in danger, but severe danger, they thought he was dying, they themselves left their bodies. They died right there on the bank of the Yamuna, because they thought, Krishna's gone. He's my life and soul. So if my life and soul is gone, how could I possibly live? It's just like taking away your air, right? So when Krishna saw this was happening, he said, okay, now it's gone a little too far. I don't want my devotees dying. So, of course they get revived, and he starts actually, doing this beautiful dance on the hoods of Kaliya, and then, knocks all the venom out of him. And then Kaliya's wives come and they offer prayers. So Kaliya is one of the demons that Krishna doesn't kill, right? But so he chastises him. So after everything's done, Krishna comes back to the bank of the Yamuna. Everyone's revived. Everyone's completely glad to see him again. And do you know what they did after that night? Do you know what everyone did?
Krishna?
Do you know what all the residents of Raj did that night with Krishna?
I don't remember.
Well, they, since they just had this experience of Krishna being gone and them dying, because of it. They didn't go home. Nobody went home. They all spent the night on the bank of the Yamuna because they didn't want to take their eyes off of Krishna. So they just stared at him because they couldn't bear the pain of being separated from Krishna again. And so, of course, then eventually they all fell asleep right there on the bank of the Yamuna. And then there was a forest fire, which Krishna then saved them from. But yeah, nobody went home. It wasn't like, okay, Krishna's fine, everybody go home. No, they all slept on the bank of the Yamuna because they didn't want to take their eyes off of Krishna. So that also reminded me of this, because these great personalities, they wanted to take full advantage. They knew that he was going to be gone soon, so they didn't want to leave. They wanted to make sure they saw this, and they knew he was going back to Godhead. He was saved by Krishna in the womb. He was a great emperor. He always made his decisions based on Krishna, not based on his own material accumulation or anything like that. And so they knew, okay, this is a devotee. He's going to go back to the spiritual world. So I want to get as much association as possible from him. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Thank you. So it'll be nice. We also have the association of devotees. They were taking association. The we are saying that they were taking association of Maharaj Parikshit. And here
And
we
Shukadeva
need
Goswami.
association, right?
Yeah, they're taking the association of both. Shukadeva Goswami, of course, because he's speaking, and also Maharaj Parikshit, because it takes so in that situation, most people, like I said, first of all, they'll try to counteract. They get cursed, they're going to be like, okay, hold on, this isn't even what I meant. It wasn't that severe. Let's take it easy here. He didn't do any of that. He understood, okay, this is Krishna's plan, so he just accepted it. And that's why Shukadeva Goswami is going to come, and he's going to talk. He's going to speak the Bhagavad Purana. He's going to speak Srimad Bhagavatam, right? So it's the whole situation that adds to it. Does that make sense?
Thank you, Prabhu. Yeah. Kalpesh, there's some questions.
Okay. Kalpesh Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Your class was good, but somehow not a lot to me. I'm not at that level yet, so maybe you're saying things. So I have a conscious dualities, not really understanding, even though let's say previously I was not doing the spirituality, then I had in my mindset the comparison of material things. Now I'm in learning about the spiritual, then I try to look from the spiritual eyes, things, and but still see when there is less acceptance for others. And I see when I see in my conscience and try to find out what exactly, when I have that ego issue, I understand if I'm doing right and what others are doing wrong. That is the mental behind it. There is an enviousness towards others. I think I understand the things is the only way of doing things, so that is one of and I recognize that it is due to the enviousness I possess, because I'm not probably able to see the qualities which are happening around me. It's also due to the will of Krishna, and I understand that. But then there is a struggle for not repenting it and not praying it hard, and not able to accept that mistakes. So how do we the real way of, like, because anyway what we will be doing, it would be in the, because we will see when we are identified with something, of course we are going to protect it, that for our own identity, and when we identify, then we we are strong about Krishna, about things, but then necessarily the world in which we associate are not exactly Krishna conscious, and then we see those dualities. Then we do go into the mindset, and then I feel that, okay, am I envious towards that, or am I not seeing the qualities of Krishna, that this is what Krishna is putting in front of me? That is where my struggle is. I see sometimes I get agitated, and sometimes agitated in my mind by in the given situations, and then I start saying, like, how do I repent myself? But I am not repenting it. I'm not praying it. I'm not trying to ask sincerely that please make me Krishna. Like, how can I how do the right things? How can I serve you all the time? Right. So this is my I'm trying to say in back what is going in my inside. Not necessarily everybody would saying it, but I found out in the conscious ego and envious. These are the two problems poses for myself, and that leads me to comparisons all the time, between good and bad, right and wrong kind of thing, and then necessarily it will end up into dualities, So Prabhuji, I'm clear with my question. Then how to know I'm doing for Krishna?
How do you know if you're doing it for Krishna? Yeah, if you see that there's a lot of envy and like that, then that's not Krishna conscious, right? So, and that shouldn't. Now, it's good that we notice it, but that shouldn't make us. It shouldn't deter us from continuing, right? So some people, they get daunted by that. They see that, oh, okay, I'm just envious. I'm comparing myself to others all the time, and I think I'm the only one that's doing it right, and everyone else is wrong, and so I'm just a bad devotee, so I'm not even going to try anymore. So some people would do that. We don't want to do that, but we want to see, and it's actually it's pretty easy for us when we're in this neophyte state to there's this exercise we can do. You've noticed that you've learned a lot in Krishna consciousness, right?
Yes. And only way I understand is the way my behavior and habit has slightly changed.
Okay. But you've made some changes. Yeah. So early on, before you made those changes, as you were learning and starting to make these changes, you understood that Krishna was being merciful to you, that he was showing you the right way to do something so that you could make those changes, right? Whether it was from chanting or from reading or from hearing from a devotee, you understood, oh, this is something that I should change. So then it was changed. So Krishna was being merciful to you. Mm-hmm. So we can also see that any other person, any other aspiring devotee, anyone who is chanting Hare Krishna or regularly coming to the temple or is just trying, as long as they're connected with Krishna in some way, that means they're dear to Krishna, even if they're making some mistakes, right? So we don't compare, because we know that at one point we were also making mistakes. Otherwise you wouldn't have had to make changes, right? And we can also understand that since I had to make some changes and I didn't know what those changes were before, chances are I still have many changes that I need to make, right? And so then we can see, okay, so then we shouldn't become too proud and think I'm the only one that knows what's going on. We should say, okay, well, I have a lot more to learn. And here are some people that I can learn from, because they're also sticking around. Krishna's keeping them around. So there may be things that they're struggling with that I have overcome, and maybe I can help them with those. But there are certainly things that they have overcome that they can help me with, right? And so when we develop this cooperative mentality, that's what relationship is all about. And that's what Krishna consciousness is all about. It's all about relationship. Sambandha means the knowledge of the relationship between us and Krishna and us and the other devotees, right? Because in the spiritual world, everything is harmonic. Everything works in perfect harmony. There's no conflict. There are sometimes semblances of conflict to make the flavor of the relationship increase, but it's never envy, right? It's just, like transcendental competition. So Krishna, for example, when he's playing with the cowherd boys, sometimes they'll play games, right? And they'll say, okay, whoever wins, the losers have to carry the winners on their shoulders and then carry us back to, one of the other forests, right? And so there's competition. So someone loses, right? And then they're teasing him because they're having to carry him. But it's not out of envy. It's just out of relationship, and it's fun for them. It's not like here in the material world we do that, and we're sore losers. We have a problem with it. Then we're, oh no, you cheated, like that. But it's not like that in the spiritual world. So sometimes it looks like there's some sort of conflict, but it's not really a conflict. It's just making the relationship, stronger. So Krishna, oftentimes he'll lose so he can carry some of his devotees on his shoulders. Sometimes he wins and he's on their shoulders, and sometimes he loses. And both are very relishable, whether you're being carried by Krishna or you're carrying Krishna. Both are relishable. So we have to gradually stop feeding that bear of materialism and start feeding that bear of spirituality. And the way to do that is in the association of devotees. So we have to develop those relationships, and because otherwise there's no way. If you want to learn the truth, you have to approach a spiritual master, and the spiritual master will tell you that the first step is to have faith, shraddha. The second step is associate with devotees. We need to do that. But if we think we're the only one that knows, what's going on and everyone else is doing it wrong, then we're not going to have good relationships with the devotees. We're not going to be able to learn, right? And so we have to do that. It's common because here we are in the material world. We think that we are the controller and the enjoyer. That's the very thing that we have to overcome. And so slowly that'll work as long as we stay sincere and we consistently study the Shastra, follow the instructions of the Guru, follow the examples of the sadhus. Then automatically these things will come. These things will become clear, and then we'll make more changes, right? And then the more we feed that spiritual bear, then the weaker that material bear becomes, and then it wins. Did that address everything you asked? Kalpesh Prabhu? Okay.
Yes, Prabhuji. It is.
Thank you for that question. It's a very important one, and we all struggle with it. No matter what, no matter how many years we've been in contact with Srila Prabhupada's movement, this is a struggle for all of us. Whether it's a big struggle or a little struggle, we're all dealing with it. Because that's the only thing that we have to work on, is that polluted consciousness, this false ego. If that's what we're taking the influence from, then we're dealing with the reflection. As soon as we purify that consciousness, then we're dealing with the real ego, because ego just means I am. So Srila Prabhupada explains this in one of the purports to the Bhagavad Gita. I can't think of which verse now, but he talks about the difference between real ego and false ego. So ego just means I am. So real ego is I am servant of Krishna, and false ego is I am the controller, I am the enjoyer. And so once we purify that consciousness, right, because we're Tatashta, we have the opportunity to do both. Once we purify that, then we're not dealing with the reflection anymore. We're dealing with reality. We're not dealing with the shadow anymore. We're dealing with the substance, right?
And slowly, I'm also looking what really motivates me, and have a repeated thoughts of like trying to find, even it's not refined, but pretty much like why one should do Krishna consciousness if I ask to myself within myself, So that the one of the answer is coming is because it's a solution towards death. That is what it's coming. But it is repeatedly in my daily talks. Somehow that is being represented more. So I'm thinking that maybe my motivation, and it's not always full full like every moment I'm not thinking, but uh, it is happening. Uh, things are getting clear. Um, how much this world is full of disagreement.
Mhm.
What it's no good eventually. Uh, Anything we even want to say in a right intention, it's still a struggle. Uh,
Yeah.
you know, and when we experience those things, then we see a point like, okay, even the unity idea is fading out somehow in my mind. Previously, I had too much. Um, Before I joined, I thought like unity is something I would like to do, for the whole society level, kind of. But
Right.
that seems like fading out from my from my mind. If I become united with Krishna, that is enough. That is what I'm slowly understanding. Okay, unity is next to impossible because everybody is a carrier of their own karmas, and then how the results are coming to them, and how much we are not will on each of the arrangements, and so many things happening in the world. There are so many conflicts in from if we have to speak in the unit level, then it from starts from unit level, and it progresses all towards the society, state, people. So many discrimination, so many disagreements. Um, So previously, I started thinking about like, okay, why should I do what I, then the idea was about the unity, to be honest. How
Mm.
can everyone together and make a very beautiful place as like we can stay together, but that
Right.
I fading out because no, because I cannot come to my own terms, with myself, and uh, when I cannot with my close relatives and relations where I can speak openly, they are also related with me. So that's I noticed.
For a very long time, I wanted to get out of this material world because it's miserable. But that's not how you get out of the material world. Just because it's not, you know, just because it's not a good place, it's a place of suffering. It doesn't mean you're eligible to go to the spiritual world. To go to the spiritual world, you have to understand Sambandha, the relationship between you and the Supreme Lord and everyone else there, because everything is in harmony there. So we have these ideas of a perfect society, but if they're not actually what Shastra says is a perfect society, we just have our own idea of our own little perfect society, then we're not qualified to get to the spiritual world. So the Brahmavadis, for example, they can qualify themselves through sense control to get out of the material world, but they can't qualify themselves to get into the spiritual world unless they understand relationship with the Supreme Person. And so they get that strange, unique position. And that's unfortunate. So we have to, it's good that we understand that this world is a place of suffering, and that it's not ideal, and that we need to get out of it. But we have to understand who we are, who Krishna is, what the relationship is, and then once we do that, then we can actually get out of it. Then the beauty of it is we won't care if we're in the material world or the spiritual world, because we'll understand that no matter where we are, we can serve Krishna, because there's no limits on spirit. There's only limit on matter, right? So once we have spiritual consciousness, it doesn't matter if we're technically in the material world, because we're only dealing with spirit, right? So that's the beauty of it, is when we finally become qualified to get out, we don't even need to get out.
Yes,
Right.
that because then you develop the acceptance for everything is due to Krishna only. So even it is not favorable, or but that is not the behavior, because we are free from the dualities, So we are in the transcendental. But
Right. One would say that Prahlad Maharaj, for example, wasn't in the ideal situation, right? Everyone was preaching this sense gratification. They're trying to convince him of it. He didn't have good association, aside from when he was in the womb with Narad Muni, of course. People were trying to kill him constantly. They're trying to feed him poison. They're trying to throw him off. You would say that that's not the ideal situation, but it didn't matter for him because he was completely focused on Krishna. So the poison didn't affect him. The bad association didn't affect. Now we shouldn't imitate that because we're not on his plane. We're not on that platform. But we should understand that once we get to that platform, then the external situation doesn't matter, and the external situation still doesn't matter. Like we shouldn't say that because of my external situation, I cannot be Krishna conscious. That should never be a statement we say, because spirit always trumps matter. There's no such thing as because of this material thing, I can't be spiritual. No, it's because of your spiritual block, your decision to enjoy and control separate from Krishna. That's the only thing that's holding you back. No material situation can hold you back. Just that free will. And so when we can understand that, then we can start developing. Of course, we want to surround ourselves by the best possible atmosphere, the best possible people, the best circumstances. That's natural. But if we find ourselves in a situation that we don't think, and we try to say that, oh, because in this particular situation, I can't be spiritual until I can get back to, my ideal, then we don't have a full understanding. Actually, our Srila Prabhupada, before, of course, he was born a devotee, but before he was taking instructions from Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he was a nationalist. He was following Gandhi, right? And so when he first met Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he was telling Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati that until India becomes what's the word? Independent from England's rule, then we can't actually engage in spirit. It was first we have to become independent, and then we can do it. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, no. This is what you do. You just go and you preach in the English language. That was the instruction. So Srila Prabhupada very quickly understood that nothing, no material situation can hold back bhakti. And if we have that idea, that inclination that, oh, because of this current situation, I can't do bhakti, but later on, once it's ideal, then I can practice bhakti. No, that's not how it is. It's under any circumstance you can practice bhakti, and of course, you'll want to have your environment as favorable as possible. But in a circumstance where it's not possible, you can still 100% engage in bhakti. So that's something that we always have to understand.
When I said what I said, it was meant for. I understand what you said is absolutely right, and in my mind, everything is like right now vacuum. It's not like not having the relationship with Krishna. That is what also I found when I meditated on it. That every moment I'm not able to think about Krishna because I am not. I superficially know things. I have to have connection, but I am somehow I'm way in Buddhism. The teaching is the Shunyavad, right? Somewhat that Shunyavad. Sometime I'm not Shunyavad, then I'm Advait. Then at least from 0 to I'm coming to 1. That I am some. And then from 0 to 1, I'm coming to 2, which is like, okay, I have a relationship with Krishna, So this is a mixture of either 0 or 1 or it 2, So that progression, the most of the time it is 0. most of the time it is zero, because it's totally materialistic. But slowly I am working on it by keeping Krishna in front of me, a DT form, and I'm trying to see him as that he's present, in front of me, and trying to talk with him and trying to establish that relationship, by talking with him. That is what
Good.
wrong, I'm trying to do that, trying to talk with him and trying to pray with him, try to pray, but I'm praying myself too at this point. But
Yeah, that's all it takes is if we are sincere and we approach it that way and we're saying, okay, Krishna, I'm doing this for you. Even if you're doing the wrong thing, Krishna will then send someone to let you know, okay, this is that you should do it like this. So many times, back when I first heard about Krishna consciousness, I was doing offerings wrong. I was doing, all these things wrong, but the intent was good. And, I meant to do it. There was some level of sincerity there. And so since there was some sincerity there, Krishna, let me know through the devotees, through the Shastra, through the Guru, okay, actually, no, you do it this way, because otherwise it's, I was offering things that weren't even offerable back in the day, I didn't know. But so Krishna didn't say, I don't accept this, get out of here. No, he said, well, he's trying. So now, we'll educate him. So I'm sure we've all done that at some point. Right. So yeah, if we sincerely are trying to do things for Krishna, then Krishna will show us how to do things for him. So it's just sincerity and determination.
That's what made us in this group, in this Zoom, where every day we are listening to Bhagavatam. So that is what, whether we know or not, slowly we are getting into this. So that is another thing Krishna says, come into this, and yes, if you don't understand, also slowly you will do. That's what I feel all the time.
Sure.
It's a nice class, Prabhu. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prabhu.
Thank you.
So we'll see everybody again tomorrow morning at 7:50.
Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai.
Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai.
Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripasindhobhyo cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namah.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.